talk for Inishnua. My name is Claire Moyer, and I am the Associate Director and Literary Manager for Inishnua. This is our second in our series of online interviews with artists who have collaborated with Inishnua in the past, and we're really excited tonight to welcome Jamison Foreman, who has collaborated on two previous Inishnua productions, the Barrymore Award-winning Midsummer, a play with songs, and The Monster in the Hall. So we're thrilled to have him. He'll be joining us shortly. As part of our Tuesday Talk series, we are encouraging our audiences to order from locally owned restaurants. Whether you're eating dinner while you watch the chat or have plans to order out this week, we'd especially like to encourage you to support Black-owned restaurants. Philly Mag has a great list for you to start from, which Jess will be sharing in the chat. So keep an eye on the chat. If you're not comfortable with Zoom, just down at the bottom, you want to click on where it says chat. Thank you, Jess. And we'd also recommend, there's an amazing app called Black and Mobile. It's locally owned, and it's basically like Grubhub for Black-owned restaurants. So it's a great way to support locally owned businesses, and it does all the work for you. Like last week, we are sharing we wanted to share resources to support the Black Lives Matter movement and to continue moving this wave of social change forward in our city. Like last week, we're sharing the blacklivesmatter.com, which is at the bottom of the screen you're seeing right now. It's an amazing resource. If you go to that .card.co, it has a great list of ways to stay engaged, donate, whatever is the best way for you to support. We also figured that if you are on this, you're probably a patron of the arts. So here are two great ways to support Black artists. One is a list from artnet.com, which has a variety of artists you can support from different mediums. And the other one is the Black Theater Network, which is an amazing organization to know about. You can donate and support the growth of Black theater, as well as provide resources and scholarships to young Black artists, so helping to nurture the next generation. So I really encourage you, after we finish with this conversation, to check those out. All right. Before we begin the interview, just a reminder that we will be taking questions. If you go to the bottom of your screen, there should be a little icon that says Q&A. So please feel free to send me any questions as we're going through. I'll keep an eye on things. And we will do some questions at the end of our conversation. So yeah, we're really looking forward to that, and we're thrilled to have Jamison on here. So as we're also going through, Jess, who you will not be able to see, but she's here, she's present. She will be sharing some supplemental images to support what we're talking about, so you can have some references as we talk about Jamison's work and his career. So diving right in. Jamison Foreman is an actor, musician, and teaching artist, most recently seen in Ragtime at the Arden and Gifts of the Magi at the Walnut Street Theater. He has worked at many Philadelphia area theaters, including the Arden, Azuka, Walnut Street, Interact, People's Light, Quintessence, Theater Horizon, 11th Hour, Applied Mechanics, Act Two, Commonwealth Classics, Philadelphia Theater Company, and Philadelphia Shakespeare Theater. And we're sharing just a few photos from those many really impressive works. Jamison has worked outside Philadelphia at the Shakespeare Theater in DC and Everyman Theater in Baltimore, as well as the Chinese tour for the musical Fame and a run at the Edinburgh Fringe in the show Overexposed. Jamison received his MFA at Shakespeare Theater Company's Academy for Classical Acting at the George Washington University and his BFA right here in Philly from the University of the Arts. He has proudly taught at the University of the Arts, Drexel, Temple, and Westchester University. Jamison is known to Inishnua audiences for his work as the music director and arranger on Midsummer, a play with songs, for which he received the 2014 Barrymore Award for Best Musical Direction. He was also music director and composer for our 2018 production of The Monster in the Hall, as well as part of the acting ensemble in which he played Lawrence Lofthouse and many other characters. So, welcome, Jamison. Hi. Make sure you're, yeah, thanks.
All good.
How you doing?
I'm good. Oh, Zoom.
Oh, technology.
Oh, technology.
All right. I just talked to myself for 10 minutes, so I'm thrilled to have you here.
Oh, and what lovely things you were saying about me.
You.
I appreciate how you talk to yourself.
Oh, yeah. It's so great to have you. How have you been, Jamison?
I'm as well as you can be right now, yes.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I really felt after last week's Tuesday talk is that it can feel really hard to stay connected to theater right now. You know, theater is a very in-person art form, whether you're making it, watching it, performing, whatever capacity. And so part of the goal of this evening and our Tuesday talks is to help us stay connected to that. You know, we might not be able to all gather in a room. And to, you know, just to remind ourselves of what we do and remind the people that are a part of it in whatever capacity that, like, you know, we're still thinking about it and we're still going to be doing it, just maybe not this second.
Yeah. All about it.
Yeah. So we're going to start at the very beginning. And well, not quite the very beginning, but you came to Philadelphia to study at UArts. Where are you originally from?
So I'm originally from Washington, D.C. and the Northern Virginia, Southern Maryland area. And I came to UArts in 2005 to study musical theater.
And what drew you to that program?
I had a really, really close friend in high school go to the summer program the year before. And it was because of his experience going to the school that made me want to give it a shot. And so I could only audition for 3 or 4 schools, and UArts ended up being one of them. And when I came to Philadelphia, I sort of fell in love with the city and how it was sort of like New York, but not nearly as intense, and stayed ever since.
And did you stay straight through after college and start working immediately after?
Yeah, I was very lucky right out of school to get a bunch of work, which is very unrealistic for any working actor. So it sort of set up very false expectations for what the theatrical profession would be like. But yeah, right out of school, I was very lucky to get 2 shows in Baltimore and DC, and then I did that China tour that you mentioned. And then I came back and did Fiddler on the Roof at the Walnut Street Theater, and that was my first professional production in Philadelphia.
You're right, that is a very high expectation to set for a professional career.
Right? Yeah, it was just like bam, 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 and then, the joints weren't working as quickly as before. Yeah, totally.
Like you get a foreign tour, that's so cool. You're at the like the biggest theater in town. And
sure.
A big Philly show.
Oh yeah, it's easy. Yeah.
Oh man, I realized as I was going through your bio before that I didn't have any questions about your tour in China, which I was like, that seems like it should be rife with questions. I have so much that I want to know.
You want to know something crazy about that tour in China? I visited the meat market where COVID is said to have originated.
Did you?
I did.
What a fascinating coincidence.
I know, right? I mean, seriously, of all the places, I mean, it was one of 8 cities that we toured to, and yeah, we definitely, like, I definitely remember walking past and then through that meat market.
That is crazy.
Yeah, 6 degrees of COVID.
Yeah, like ships passing.
There we go.
We could do a whole other series of questions around
just about that.
The strangeness of that. That is crazy. So it's amazing. So you came back to Philly after the tour and were working at the Walnut Street. And how did you then build your professional career from there if you started with that sort of high?
Sure. Well, I suppose it's interesting to call it a high because I think as I started doing theater more, my understanding of what I wanted from the theater profession started to shift. There are different cultures, I think, in different spheres of theater. And to be a musical theater actor is different than being a classical actor, is different than being a contemporary actor, is different than being a devised actor. And I was just starting to realize that there was a certain level of hustle and sheen that was needed in order to continue at that high level of musical theater performance that I ultimately didn't quite have the passion for. I definitely had the passion for musical theater, but there's a hunger that a lot of young musical theater performers have and were willing to fight for that I don't know. Like they're starting to get to the point where it's just like, all right, And I think this is kind of a direction where a lot of theaters are going right now, definitely. Why are we telling this story? Why am I telling this story? Why am I part of this huge machine where, as an actor, when you're studying acting, you think like, oh, I've got complete control over everything I do, and I have to feel, and blah, blah, blah. And then you get out and start doing theater professionally, and you realize, oh, I am but a player in a huge team, let alone a player who has to subordinate my desires to an overarching direction or playwright's theme that I can't change, right? And so I think that made me start to push out into realms of theater that I wouldn't otherwise have gone into. I was very lucky to have met Kevin Glackham at Azuka Theater, who kind of gave me some of my first shots in more like contemporary 80-seat house type things, not like the 1,500-seat house that the Walnut is. And I think starting from there, I started to get a taste of like how you can impact an audience member beyond what I thought capable. And certainly that is not to say that musicals aren't incredibly impacting and moving and all of that, but there's a different level of being moved when you're on that giant size of a stage as opposed to being smaller. Like I wonder if our show, Monster in the Hall, could have withstood a theater much larger than the one that we were in, considering the level of intimacy that we had and how intimate we made the music. I mean, do you think it could have withstood a bigger house?
I don't know, but I kind of agree with you. I don't know that I would want it to have been bigger. Maybe marginally, but there's something so amazing to me about like big budget musicals. Like I love seeing them. They blow me away. And
yeah,
the technicality of them from and like and some days I'm like, wow, like that kind of scale, that kind of budget, that like, and to be like overwhelmed with something.
oh yeah,
Like
well,
it's hard to describe, but also you're right. There's a real value in like looking someone in the eye,
yes,
which you just don't get in those
yeah.
sort of spaces.
And when you look at the panoply of the musicals that we were up against that year, I mean, like you really see like the spectrum of each of those institutions trying to thread that needle in their own way. I mean, the Arden doing Once, which was very similar to ours, but in a much larger house. And then, what was it, Bridges at PTC?
Yes, I didn't see that.
Oh, luscious, gorgeous, but very, very much like a movie, where there is that disconnect in the proscenium, and like the play is there and we are here and the gloriousness washes over you and you just accept it,
Yeah.
And then there was The Color Purple, the juggernaut that just like, that you felt in your bones. And I feel like each one of us was getting at that connection that music is able to have in terms of inspiring and connecting in a way with an audience member that maybe you can't without music being there.
Yeah, I think we could again go really deep down this, but I think, a lot of people I think get their first connection to theater through musicals, right? You can buy soundtracks and listen to them in advance. You can see things on Broadway, and that appeal is really tangible. And then on top of it, like music allows for a connection that is really like, in the way you've been saying, like it has like a physical effect on us, right? You're at an amazing concert when you're seeing really a beautiful live performance. And I feel like as theater has to kind of re-examine itself in the digital world, right? And be like, we're not film, we're not TV. What can we offer is that sense of like, I can feel the bass in my bones, right?
Yeah.
That you get when you go to a concert, that you get when you go to these big musicals, but that's not what every company can do. And so I think there has been this beautiful shift in the past maybe 10, 15 years to exploring like what a musical is, right? Even Midsummer is called Midsummer, a play with songs, right?
Right.
And that's maybe, mincing, like splicing it out, but I do feel like music allows for us to live in that tangible, interconnected world of people being in the same room. And it is super, super heightened. And as theater goes, okay, we're not film TV, we are a heightened medium, and music thrives in that.
Right.
So I totally get, and I feel it too. Like, I love shows that incorporate music. And to be honest, you know, Midsummer and Monster in the Hall have been some of the biggest successes for Inishnu, and I think because people gravitate towards that.
Yeah.
Also, common denominator. So obviously,
Clearly.
Clearly.
When I talk to my students, I always bring up the. Okay, get ready. There's an Austrian philosopher named Ludwig Wittgenstein.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and he has this wonderful concept of like a word is nothing more than an image that you're able to throw into someone else's head. And I feel that music is very much able to operate on that level, where there is a lot that we feel and a lot that we experience that a word is incapable of encompassing. And there is a certain element of music that I think allows you to see time in a different way. It allows you to experience it in a more drawn out, physical. I just when that feeling you're talking about, that music is able to elicit, just reminds me of Wittgensteinian words. That it's like like that in and of itself is a word. It's able to communicate something beyond just the frequencies that are hitting your eardrum and then being registered in your head. I mean, it's insane to me that like we as a culture listen to major or minor music and how we instantly associate major with happy and minor with sad. And it's, I constantly think, is that something that we were born with? Is that something that our society has gotten used to over time? I mean, like when you think of like klezmer music or Jewish ancestral music, like usually that's in minor tones, but in kind of like a happy, more upbeat place. And so particularly when you're coming at something like Monster in the Hall, you know, which is set so specifically in Scotland, and you start to listen to that ancestral music and you hear like some of the most sad Scottish tunes are in these bright major sounds, and some of the most happy things are in these it just makes you think like, what are the images that we take for granted with music, and how we're using that to communicate.
Cool thing to think about too, because I think sometimes, so I was looking back at photos of the show, right, and that's a visual medium, and then I was saying earlier that Jamison and I were chatting a little bit before this, that we have a recording of the show. It's not like a professional recording. It's just for like our purposes of having an archive of it. And to like hear the show again was a very strange thing.
Yeah.
I've seen the photos for a year and a half. You know, they're on our website. We post them on social media. Like those have lived with me. But to have like a chance again to like hear the music and hear the accents and hear the rhythm of it was like, in some ways so familiar. I was like, oh yeah, this moment. Like, I don't even need to, I know what this is.
Yeah.
And at other points, I'm like, oh,
right.
Is that what that sounded like? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Because it's been, you know, when you're in the midst of making something, you're so in it. You don't necessarily, I mean, part of my job is to not be in it and to look at it. But, you know, it happens so quickly in a process.
Yeah.
To step away from a year and a half. But
it's so, I always get struck by show photos because, you know, being in a temporal art form where what we do is then lost to the ether the moment we do it, like it's insane looking at some of the photos that you put up of me from different shows, and you know, like you asked me to send you some to prep for this, and I was looking through others, and it's insane how some of the best show photos ever taken were from the worst productions I have ever seen, let alone been in. I mean,
we won't see which ones those
were. No, I won't say it. I won't say it.
I totally know what you mean, though. You can really sell a show with a great
with a good photo. Well, I mean, that's the thing. It shows you that it's a different art form and a different artist is making that product.
Totally. And people always talk about how, like, this is not very exciting but like people talk about how like there are people who know how to photograph theater.
Yeah.
And you realize it's like, because they're like this second component. The art form already exists, right, with the set and the actors and the lighting, and to be
Yeah.
able to respond to that as opposed to like create your own lighting, create your own structure of things, is a skill in and of itself. But yeah, I always find it strange too to think about like having these like great records of certain elements of the design and production, but you don't get like, unless you're doing an original cast recording or
Right.
something, which obviously we're not doing.
Yeah. Let's go to the studio, knock out a couple G's for that, right?
Muscle that up from a year and a half ago. This kind of brings me to one of the questions I wanted to ask you, which is that I remember once you described yourself as a Swiss Army knife, and that really stood out to me as a phrase. And as far as like the different things you are able to do artistically, I don't know if you remember saying this or if this is something you say often.
Vaguely.
But I just remember it being a really like funny and kind of accurate description. So I was wondering if you could like talk about what that means.
Sure. Well, I mean, I owe a lot of who I am and a lot of my artistry to my mom. Both of my parents were actors, and my mom became ultimately a director and an artistic director in the DC area when DC was run by dinner theaters. There was a dinner theater for every person. There were like 300 equity dinner theaters, and they all fed thousands of actors. It was the golden era. At least that's what it always seems like. But my mom and dad were just incredible inspirations when I look back on it. I mean, they would tell me things or they would do things that now I think, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. Like just being nominated for Helen Hayes's or winning Helen Hayes's or being in this show or that show with this famous actor or that famous actor. And I think because my parents were both in the business when I was born and as I was being raised, if I showed a particular proclivity towards some art, they would do everything they could to foster it. Particularly my mom. And so just over the years, what just started to happen was my mom would expose me to this Sondheim musical or this Mozart concerto, or, you know, would find some secondhand piano for me to start to use, and then would this and that. And then, you know, like I started gaining a little weight when I was in middle school. She was like, I don't want you to do a sport, go do ballet. So I went and did ballet forever. And I think just a lot of oh yeah, there we go. So I think just all of that kind of just built into a large amount of skills that I could use as a professional to make money as a professional. And if anything is to be gleaned, I guess, from this, if like a student of mine was listening or something, I would say that I don't think that there's a single, it is very rare for an actor to just be an actor. And so I think the more you can find ways to satisfy your artistic desires while maybe not doing the exact thing you want to be doing, you know, like if I had my druthers, I'd be doing I'd be playing a part all the time, but that can't be possible, you know? And so if I can then support someone else by playing or composing music or helping to choreograph or fight direct or do a dialect or something like that, where I can still feel part of a process in some way, is just as fulfilling. And I think as I get older too, acting has to start being less about me in order for it to matter to me. I'm not sure if you saw, but there was this meme that went around recently, I think from the Times in London or the Guardian or something, that had a whole bunch of, it was an infographic of professions and how essential they were. And, you know, like doctors were number one. They had the top 5 and then the top least 5 essential professions. And number 1 was artist, with 74% of respondents saying that it was not essential.
Cool.
Right. And, you know, as an artist, speaking to an artist, for artists, I'm sure we can all argue that art is essential. I mean, no one's not watching Disney Plus and Netflix while they're going through COVID and whatnot. But it does kind of make you think. And it does kind of make you delve into the stereotypes of what it means to be an actor. Why do so many people think of us as vain? Why are actors sometimes stereotyped as dumb? You know, what can we do moving forward, regardless of how you feel about any of this? You know, we're going to need to be new artists when we can make art again. So it's really important to ask, what is the art we want to make, and what are the vessels that we want making that art? It's difficult not to look in the mirror these days and not see, like, holy fuck, I am a white man walking through this world where there is so much difficulty for people not in this body. What space can I make? What can I do with these Swiss Army knife capabilities that make it more worthwhile than just satisfying some desire deep inside of my ego that I want to play Hamlet someday, you know? Like, which I do,
Right.
but, you know,
You're allowed to have that.
Right, but maybe, you know, white men don't need to play Hamlet for the next 2 years or so, you know, like...
We should have a whole other conversation about Shakespeare.
True that.
True
that.
I know what you mean, though. I think most people, despite maybe how popular culture wants to depict it, are in the arts because they want to do something bigger than themselves. I think
Right.
theater, you know...
At least you hope.
Yeah, you know, I mean, we all have ego wrapped up in whatever it is we do. And I think when you work in a medium that has opening nights and opportunities for applause, that can also make it feel maybe more extreme than other industries. But I also feel like I know very few people who've chosen a life in the arts, which is not an easy life, simply because of, you know, ego. And I think there is a desire to, you know, serve others, right? It's like a vocation almost. No number of actors have become social workers, and I'm like, that
Right.
makes so much sense to me,
Right.
right?
Or go into, like, they get ordained or something like that. Yes, totally.
It's about serving people. We talked a bit last week with Rachel Broder about her work in, not as a standardized patient, but sort of in an adjacent role, which is like training doctors and how to communicate with people. And that, like, the skill of being human and being human with others is a skill that actors have that can sometimes be really undervalued. And for the medical profession to go, actually, we as scientists see a value in this, right?
Yeah.
And I really think that I agree. I think you're right that this is an opportunity for us to kind of go back to those core reasons we all chose this, because it definitely was not for the money, and it almost definitely wasn't really for the recognition, because we're not, you know, we're not famous on that level. We're making art in a community for a community, and I think being challenged as artists to think, like, what is that art we should be making, and how can we serve that art?
And you know, like you said, you talked about applause earlier, and it's just so fun. Like, I'm sure you've been there where, like, or maybe actually I hope you haven't, but like there are times where, like, I've definitely been in shows where I know that the product we are giving is subpar. Never with Ines Nua, I will tell you that. Never.
Good answer.
Right? Ever. I'd never ever utter it. But there have been times where I have been doing shows where I'm like, oh, this is bad. This is bad. And then no matter what, the curtain comes down and the lights come up, and without a doubt, people start applauding. And they're still smiling. And you start to realize that, applause is not so much an indication of approval anymore as it is sort of like the period at the end of a sentence. It's almost like the social contract of theater, where it's like, no matter what I just saw you do, I am thanking you for doing something. Thank you so much. And the more you do it, the more you realize, they're not applauding me. They're applauding this.
The process.
Right. And sometimes they are. Sometimes they're like, "Whoo, damn, you were great. And I love you," you know?
But you can sort of tell the difference, can't you, between like the good job and the passionate response.
Yeah.
I'm going to move us a little bit to chat about some of these newest shows.
Yeah.
So your first show is Midsummer, a play with
Mm-hmm.
songs by David Grigg and Jordan McIntyre. Can you explain a little bit about that show and what part music played in it? Because I think the fact that it is a play with songs
Yeah.
is not inherently clear to people.
Sure. Well, the play was about, and it makes a lot more sense to me now as a 32-year-old than it did as like what, a 27, 8-year-old. But it's about two 30-somethings in Scotland that are single and unhappy, and just kind of like, I think it takes place over like what, 48 hours, 72 hours, something. Yeah, it's just like a weekend, a madcap romp. And the two end up finding each other, and they were played by Liz Filios and Charlie Day Marcel, who are.
And Charlie is actually watching right now. He's already sent us a question. So.
There we go. Then I will finish this thought, since it was genuine and authentic, before I start busting his balls. The two of them were just so incredible to be able to watch work every night. And I know I wouldn't have been able to do my job nearly as well if I didn't have the capabilities and musicianship and accessibility to their humanity, the way that Liz and Charlie really came to it. And my drummer, Kanako, was just frickin' incredible too. But the way that the music worked in that was there was no music.
Right.
Yeah. The way that, how do you say his last name?
Greg, David Grigg.
Greg. I always want to say Greg. Greg.
Yeah, no, it's not.
That's a composer.
Yeah.
He writes with no line delineation. So it's up to the actors and the director and the production team to break up the lines as they see fit, basically, which is incredible, but also difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, in Midsummer, there was specific places where songs were supposed to go, and I got, I believe, kind of like melodies, just like written out with a couple chords on top, but not like a full score or anything. And with Monster in the Hall, it was even less.
Yeah,
just
it was like if that.
Yeah, it was like if text was italicized, make it musical, maybe.
And
somehow.
it wasn't even that clear, so we're gonna try to, I mean, Monster in the Hall is by the same playwright, so it came with the same challenges where we know it's written to be performed with music. We know that there are little bits of things that exist, right? Like a little tune or a tiny video you can watch. But when you buy the rights to the play, you just get this text that's written almost more like a poem or something.
Poem, yeah, a really long epic poem, totally.
Yeah, and even like I remember with Monster in the Hall, like it's almost written like what we studied in school, concrete poems, right? Where there'd be like words all over the page in different places. So you're like, what is the thing I'm interpreting out of this, right?
Yeah.
Like, is it a character line? Is it a rhythm? What is it? So it's a very nebulous thing. Yes.
And then my job for Midsummer, and then along with you too in Monster in the Hall, was to then try to figure out, and thank God I had you and Kate Galvin. I mean, once again, not only, and I mean, both casts and both directors were just so flexible and open with what I was constantly doing. But it was us doing that Wittgensteinian thing of like, what did we need the music to say that wasn't being said or performed on stage? Yeah. And so I remember very distinctly, I wrote like this whole opening number for Monster in the Hall.
Yeah.
And you know, like it was good. Yeah, it was cool. It was fine. But it was slow and sad and kind of somber and was very indicative of the character, but not what the play needed at that moment to progress it forward. And there were many moments in Midsummer that were the same way. I remember Liz once came up, Liz Filios, who played the female protagonist of the play, it came to me one day, and there was this song that she was supposed to sing about a hangover.
Hmm.
And she came to me and was like, what I think about when I'm hungover is just like a punk's rock song. Can I like just like play a punk rock song on an accordion? And I was like, yeah, let's figure that out. And we were able to use the words that an accordion can speak to facilitate what she was trying to communicate through the song itself of being hungover. They were able to play off of each other. Or there was this one long extended monologue that Charlie had that was called, in the play itself, it was called The Song of Bob's Cock, I believe, where he was talking to his genitalia in a humorous way. And there was another section in our play that was very similar when Duck, played by Clarice Park. I miss them so much. And Doug, who played, what was that character's name? Mac? Duke, right. Are trying to make macaroni.
Yeah.
And both of them just had in the text some type of rhythmic thing. And then it just kind of went from there. And so Charlie and I in Midsummer and us with, got so many names now they're all, we were just able to figure out how the text interlaid with rhythmic patterns and like which rhythmic instruments helped facilitate the scene. Like, is it claves? Is it a cajon? Is it, a glockenspiel? Things to make the scene sparkle.
How do you work then with actors? Because I know we had sort of mini, auditions with music, but this isn't something where like, oh, we need someone who plays the violin. We need someone who is a soprano. We kind of had 4 actors for Monster, 2 actors for Midsummer, who again, I wasn't in the Midsummer process, but like who have these skills, but you don't even have the structure to like know where to slot them in.
Right.
Like how do you work with the actors within the like parameters of the skills that they have?
Well, I think what you're getting in right there is the most important part, is that I've been involved in many actor-musician productions, and the most successful thing in any circumstance is a person can't make art if they're scared or if they think that they are not up to the level of art that is being asked of them. Those two things shut them down. And there is nary a person who won't sit down at an instrument or open their mouth to sing that won't instantly start fear or doubt in their abilities. All 5 of the actors that I worked with in both of those productions had wide ranges of musical abilities, but the one thing that they all had in common was at least a consistent level of acting. They all were wonderful actors. I mean, all of them have been nominated for something in some way or another for something. I mean, Doug, Clarice, Lenny, I mean, my God, they're all freaking brilliant. And Liz and Charlie, I mean, I can't say enough. And so I think going back to your Swiss Army knife comment is the reason why I'm hired is because I can take away that fear. I know that in order to tell these stories, their acting has to come first. They are actors. They are actors, and they have to be viewed and treated as actors that have incredible abilities beyond what they're being asked. But to know that they are not asked to be musicians, that whatever they are doing, whatever I ask them musically to do is driven from the point of view of their character and will facilitate either them finding out more about who their character is, will help you or the director tell the story, or will help clarify something that the playwright was making oblique within their text. I think it is paramount for anyone listening that has any type of power in this type of circumstance to understand just how nerve-wracking any music can be. Having the two productions I just finished, both Gifts of the Magi at the Walnut and Ragtime at the Arden, were huge productions with lots of production value, with incredibly talented casts. But all of them were nervous about having to act and play or sing at the same time. Every single one of them. It is. Anyone who makes it look easy is the greatest actor in the world, because it is so hard. It is so hard.
I think one of the things I really appreciated about how you worked with the actors is that I have a sort of similar philosophy, is that like the actor is the most vulnerable part of the process, right? Of the product itself. Because, and that's not to like say that actors are not capable of taking care of themselves or anything, but at the end of the day, after opening night, the rest of us get to go home, or the crew and the stage manager are there, but they are hidden, and the actor is the person who puts themselves in front of an audience every night, and sometimes, like you said earlier, in a product that they know they might not be proud of or happy with, or that is just sort of a job to them, unfortunately is the case. And I think so much of a process is both like discovering the play, but also building that relationship and building that confidence in the product and in the people who are guiding you to the product, right? Like the actor has to trust you as the music director. They have to trust me as the director.
Right.
They have to trust the designers around them, even if they're not necessarily interacting with all these people as much. And that there's like a process. And I think one of the things I enjoyed working with you and Jamison is that there was this process, right? We came in and had some ideas and threw some stuff around, and things would get tweaked, and you'd go home overnight and I'd go home, and we'd come back and be like, this thing, yeah, okay, let's try it,
Right.
Or you'd be like, I need to think about it, and come back and be like, this is it. And I'd be like, yeah, that's it.
Well, and we also started to discover just how much music the text could hold. I mean,
you added, so like we filled that in.
Oh, and I remember after doing it was either our first run or our designer run or something, and Tom watched it and he was like, you could throw in probably 15 more minutes of music. And we were like, okay, well, let's see where we can shove it in there,
But it's such, for me, like, I love scripts that are like ripe for being filled with things, right?
Yeah.
Like I get if a script has too many stage directions, I'm like, no, you don't trust me.
Right.
Or my actors, or my design, or like, you don't trust the team making this. But David Griggs swings the opposite way, where he trusts you so much that it's like, have some fun.
Right, yeah. He's like, if I was a playwright, I wonder if I'd ever relinquish that much control. It truly
really
is impressive.
Yeah, I don't know that I would ever, as a director, I can guarantee you I would never relinquish. Right. That's not how it works. I do find it fascinating. And one of the other things that people might not know is that the original production, and I know we're gearing a little towards Monster in the Hall just because that's more recent and I was on the process. The original production had doo-wop style music in it.
It was so drastically different.
Yeah, it was like a sort of 60s doo-wop band behind Duck, because there's one reference into the play that she's writing a musical with Lawrence that's like about a girl group from the 60s.
Right.
And we looked at it and we were like, she's 16 and it's 2018. Like, why is she listening to doo-wop?
Yeah.
And so we shifted everything to this more like contemporary reference point. And I'm so glad we did, because it felt like the music of a teenage girl. Oh, I love that. With her underwear hanging there. I think, and I think one of the things that excites me about these pieces that you've been a part of creating is that they are fully unique. If you did not, like, if you saw Monster in the Hall or Midsummer, any other theater in the country or in the world, it would look nothing like
drastically different.
Nothing like this.
Yeah.
And I love that. Oh, there is the guidance counselor. So one of the questions I have that, I saw this from the other side as the director. In Monster in the Hall, you're both the music director, you were composing, and probably composing more than you necessarily realized you would be coming into the process. And then also acting in it with the dialects, playing multiple parts. How do you balance all of that? Because I know this is not the only time when you've worn many, many hats in one
Right.
show.
It kind of becomes like a, well, you have to, I guess like first I usually bifurcate. So it's, there are like certain times where I dedicate myself to thinking about one thing or another and only that thing. So usually after we'd finish rehearsal and it was kind of like ripe in my head, I'd maybe putz around on the piano a little more, to kind of finish out maybe some ideas that I had while other people were rehearsing that I couldn't play out all the way or something like that. And then there'd be times where I would fully dedicate myself to what was needed in order to tell the story as the actor, and the dialect work from there. When I'm when I have to be an actor instrumentalist, it requires a bit more of, I suppose, my dance training than I normally go into, because, and actually, oh yeah, I'll put a pin in that because it'll bring me back to something that you said when we were rehearsing. In that, usually when I'm acting and playing, it requires me to have to get to my instrument or move instruments or configure myself in a certain way. And usually those are the types of plays where there's no backstage time, where it's just sort of like, you keep going, you know? And so it gets very much muscle memory, body memory, more than if I was doing something like Shakespeare or Constantine and the Seagull or something like that, where it's all very much like, you know, locking in with your partner and feeling the organicness of the moment within the framework that you've already set up. Which reminds me of, I remember like late into our process during Tech Week, I had started to do this physical mannerism that was kind of like stiff as I was approaching Clarice. And you were like, what's going on there? And I had started reverting back to a kind of body posture and movement style that I was doing when I was playing kind of like a Charlie Chaplin-esque Festi in a Twelfth Night production that was like a few months before that. And I had to play piano in that too, and there was like a certain sequence in Monster in the Hall that was similar enough that that physical residue was starting to come back again. And I wasn't even aware that I was doing it until you pointed it out. But it's certainly not autopilot, but it is very similar because music is structured time. It doesn't give you nearly as much leeway as you would in maybe some other type of productions. And so the way that Monster in the Hall in particular worked, that was so kind of tuned like to a T in terms of like where the music went. You know, I'm sure like Eleni and Clarice and Doug and I were, I mean, if we were 6 inches in the wrong direction during a certain cross, you know, we'd completely screw up a costume change or an entrance. So it had to be much more balletic than other stuff.
Do you find that there's a shift in the process when you go from being in rehearsal to being on stage, like that you have to kind of, because I think there's so many different versions of it, right? There's the rehearsal, there's the development of the music and the characters at the same time, right? Both the character you're playing and the characters you're supporting, and you're having to look at the show as like a sort of larger whole,
right?
Other actors are who can focus on their one track.
Yeah.
And then you shift into performance, and you're still, you know, they're actor musicians, you're actor musician and in charge and the music director. And I've, you know, gone off and I'm not there every night. Like, does that have a different shift to it, or is it sort of a variation on what you're talking about?
Oh yes, it has a very different shift. And I will tell you that that is probably the aspect of my career that has taken me the longest to learn. Because when you're an actor in an ensemble, you're an actor in an ensemble. There are lots of rules that transpond between actors of equal level. You know, you don't give actors notes. You don't keep track of what other people are doing for later. You know, you don't, there's just like 2 very different sets of skills needed to be a director of some sort and then to be an actor of some sort. And I have definitely had to learn how to thread that needle. And I don't do it well all the time. uh, because a lot of times, usually when I'm musical directing a show, it's a show that I've also composed in some way. So not only am I trying to maintain a level that a director has left the show at,
Yeah.
that normally would be my job as a musical director anyway, but then I'm having to maintain my own creation, which gets difficult too. Because the other kind of like unwritten thing about acting is once it opens, it's the actors. You know, the stage manager maintains the integrity of what the director did, but then the actor finally gets to feel the audience and play around and maybe do something a little different and grow and change. And actors should have the right to do that. They don't get that right usually when I'm involved. and I tell you what, like, oh my God, like all the shows I've done recently, what was that thing I was in at the Walnut? Gift of the Magi,
Yeah.
and then Ragtime, and then before that, Treasure Island at the Arden.
Yeah.
You know, like all of those, I was in some type of position where it was dependent upon me to maintain musical integrity or what I wrote or what other people musical directed. And I was also in them.
Oh my gosh.
And in all three, I definitely crossed boundaries at times that I shouldn't have. Which is not just, you know, it's just politics within, you know, like our roles. I also don't think there are many people who do what I do, so I haven't been able to observe someone else doing it. You know,
That's
to
fair.
like,
I think it's kind of in like there are people who music direct, there are people who act, there are a handful of people who overlap, but you're probably not in the same room as them anyway because
Right.
you're getting hired for different productions. Just a reminder to everyone watching, we are going to take a few minutes of Q&A. I have a few questions from Charlie. We did get a question sent in advance, which I wanted to throw in here while we're talking about music. This is from Ed Doherty. Hi, Ed. How often are you sitting through a play and thinking, this could really use some music, and I have just the idea on how to do that?
oh, all the time. All the time.
You're like, I can tweak this.
It's just, and it's just going back to the language thing. I just think so often music is thought of as either an afterthought or is a hat on a hat, in that a director is like, I want it to feel this way, and when they've already brilliantly directed what I'm watching or listening to feel that way. And so then what is the music doing other than distracting me or feeling masturbatory? I very much do not like synthesized music. There's always just kind of like this guttural feeling inside of that, unless it's like very specific, like some type of like, you know, like in a cyberpunk environment, or talking about something modern or technological or Black Mirror-y. The other thing too that people kind of forget about is that, you know, like all those Apple loops that everyone gets for free, like everyone gets them for free.
Yeah.
So like there are a lot of times where I'll hear, particularly Pendulum. If you're curious, there's in your iTunes or your GarageBand, there is a track called Pendulum that I hear in a lot of commercials and in a lot of TV theater background stuff, and it's just like, think of it like a word. It's a word. Music is words.
I remember seeing a production many years ago, a Shakespeare production, where they had put like pop music into it, and it was a really weird thing though, because they were putting actual like full pop songs, and they didn't kind of make sense because the pop songs serve the same role as like the soliloquies and the monologues, so you're getting the same thing twice over.
Right.
And what you said reminded me of that, like thinking about like the music is part of the story and the music has to be entwined in the story. And I think that's one of the things I love about these David Gregg plays. Obviously the music is very flexible,
Yeah.
but that it's like, it's so part of the storytelling.
Yeah.
And the rhythm of it, even if you didn't even put music onto it, like the rhythm of the story is so built in from day one, in that sense, that like there's never room for the music to feel like like icing on a cake kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah. I feel like music should always lead to frisson. You know, frisson is that like scientific
Yeah.
name for like the goosebumps you get when you hear something. Like in a play, it is. Oh, I will always remember this. So I remember I saw a production of Winter's Tale once. And if you're not familiar with the Winter's Tale, it's basically like two plays pushed together. One is the first act is like a tragedy, and then the second act is like a comedy. And at the end of the second act, what made the first act so tragic is this husband gets really jealous of his wife, and she gets turned into stone somehow. Blah 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 blah. Magic of Shakespeare later.
Yeah.
By the end of the play, the wife named Hermione thaws, and she stops being the statue and comes to life and happy ending. And I just remember so distinctly the sound effects of this one production of The Winter's Tale when Hermione started to thaw, and how sparse and beautiful it was in conjunction with how brilliant the actress was, in conjunction with the lighting design of, you know, like I fucking love an exposed Edison light bulb. Oh my God, give me a twinkling Edison light bulb all day long, hanging exposed from a ceiling. And just, you know, just the way the music opened that up, it's giving me frisson now, like just thinking about it. And it's the way that, you know, it's the same reason why Netflix invested so much money on that at the beginning of every time you load it. I mean, that sound is indelible to Netflix. Yeah. I can't imitate it, but if you hear it, you know what it is, you know? And I think oral imprinting is an aspect of theater that kind of gets forgotten. Like particularly in straight plays or plays that aren't musical, like you can still have hooks and earworms in plays, and they can be just as effective as any Sondheim or Rodgers and Hammerstein.
It's really funny you say I want to jump to something, but it's really funny you say that because there's often a point in a process as a director where I'll find myself not watching a show where like people will be running scenes, particularly when we're at a point where we're running large chunks, where I'm actually following along in the script, and it's not because I'm checking for lines, it's because I know what it's supposed to sound like. And I've already blocked it. I know everyone's in the right place, but I know what it sounds like in my brain, but I need to be able to just like hear it. And so I'll like actually find that I'm sitting like, and I feel like I'm being really rude to actors because I'm like not watching, but it's like I have there's an oral map of this play in my head, and I need to make sure that you're hitting those points on the map, and I can't do that if I'm watching you. Right. And that's like for a play, that's not even a musical. Yeah. That I know that. So I want to jump to the last little section, which also corresponds. It's the same question that one of the questions that Charlie sent, and to sort of wrap things up, which is I know you teach a lot. Yes. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit of what you teach and how being a teaching artist shapes you or affects you as an actor and artist.
Well, I'm lucky to, that's Fiddleheart. Yeah, so I teach at a lot of places. My favorites are, I love teaching at Drexel, and I've taught at Westchester University, and UArts as well, my alma mater. And I also am lucky to run the acting program for high schoolers over at the Arden for their summer program. And then this is a wizardry camp I teach at for 9 to 13-year-olds who are Harry Potter fans. And that's my trading card. We're starting a trading card game. We were going to this year, but we will be next year. Look out for it. 2021, summer 2021. And I think I didn't realize how impactful theater could be until I started teaching it. I think there's a level of, like you said before, or like we were talking about before about photos, right? Like how photos can mislead someone into what a production was actually like. And so if there's so little that leaves you when you're done performing something that you invested so much time in, then to be able to take the lessons that you gleaned from those experiences and then be able to give them to someone else so that they can hopefully not suffer the same stupid choices that you did, or know how to deal with other people's stupid choices in a more productive way than you do, or to be able to share what theater is really about in words that you wanted to hear them when you were younger.
Yeah.
About how, you know, and any physical being can do it, how the facets of humanity are inside of everyone, how a 9-year-old is just as receptive to the words of Shakespeare as a postgraduate from my theater department at George Washington University. You know, like it doesn't matter. And that's one of the things that makes it so difficult to hear so many people finding what we do is non-essential.
Yeah.
Where I day in and day out, be it, you know, Charlie, who sent one of these questions, like he teaches at Westchester University. Yeah. He just got tenure there, and thank God for that, because yeah. the world needs more dedicated people like him. But I mean, like there was a student at Westchester who was transitioning from male to female, who I was lucky enough to be able to coach through Some Enchanted Evening from South Pacific. Yeah. And to see this human walk into this musical theater performance class that I was subbing for Charlie, right? And, you know, to pick up Some Enchanted Evening from South Pacific that we've all a vague familiar of, and you know, I've seen terrible high school productions of it, and all this, that, and the other. And to see someone who is trying to make their outside look like how they feel on the inside, to talk about seeing someone across a lonely room, and someday, not now, but someday, being able to walk up to them and tell them that they love them. Like, or to watch a young man who is clearly on the autism spectrum come into my high school acting program over the summer, and for the first 3 days, all he does is wear a mask. He wears this mask the entire time. And you know, like, no pressure, no anything, but, you know, like, the kids are getting weirded out and yada, yada. And on the 4th day, I give him the opportunity to get up and do this monologue, and he takes off this mask and starts talking about how he's the weird one, and about how he wears this mask to feel more comfortable around other people because they give him respect that he doesn't feel when he has the mask off. And you know, those are just 2 small examples, but it doesn't stop. To help kids who are 9 to 13 deal with bullying by pretending to be a transfiguration teacher, and to give them a wand, and to use magic as a framework to teach acting, but ultimately to teach humanity. You know, it just makes it worth it. The same sensation that I'm sure you got when we had that discussion after a production of Monster in the Hall, and had people from the MS Society, because the play was about one of the characters had MS, and to see people respond about empathetically seeing their experiences on stage, and the forum that Inishnu provided for those people to talk. And to see people who just came to see a goofy Scottish play, you know, then they stay for the 15 minutes afterwards and have a conversation with a person who not only is figuring out how to navigate the world with MS, but then a medical professional who can describe it for them. It's those parts of our society that we don't seem to be valuing, that don't have a monetary value, that seem to be the most valuable. I feel like I just monologued.
No, I think everything you're saying beautifully said, and I couldn't agree with more that, I've taught quite a lot myself, and the things I think about are like, even if all of these children never step on stage again, which I hope is not the case, hopefully they have taken from this that sense of humanity, and that sense of like acting challenges you to think about how other people think about the world, right?
Right.
Because it forces you, even if it's just for 5 minutes of a scene, to communicate differently, to look at a story differently, to look at a character differently. And that may be in a very heightened form, it may be Shakespeare, it may be a musical, but like, to ask someone to step into someone else's shoes only builds a greater sense of empathy and compassion.
Right.
So if you go off and be whatever it is you be when you're an adult, I hope that that carries over, and also remembering like what these sort of spaces meant to me at that age, I think is so invaluable. Like, I know what theater meant when I was that 9 to 13, bracket, and I saw it in the kids around me too.
Right.
And I remember getting to be older and seeing it in the younger kids and being like, yeah, this is a place for you. This is a place where, like, again, even if this doesn't become your career or your life, this is a place that wants you.
Exactly. And it's seriously close to sacred. I mean, there are times where, like, when I'm teaching Shakespeare, and like, I'm at the Arden and I'm dealing with middle schoolers, and a 10-year-old gets up and does a chunk of To Be or Not to Be, and you think of, like, here is, a Latinx female-bodied 10-year-old person in 2020 Philadelphia, and they are saying text written by a white Englishman 450 years ago,
Yep.
across an ocean, and all of the people in that lineage, in those centuries, who have played that part, and how that 10-year-old little girl is now just the comma on the sentence that continues on of who is Hamlet and what it means to be Hamlet, and the facets of humanity that can be represented in that, and how every play is that way. How anytime someone gets up and starts to say text, you are summoning the ghosts and experiences of all the people that have portrayed those characters. It's so important to me that that is conveyed to more people.
Yeah.
I think that's why working at Drexel in particular is so satisfying to me, because they don't have a major. It's just people who are really fucking interested in theater and want to dedicate even more time when they're not being engineers or astrophysicists to figuring out, I teach voice and speech there. And so, we just massage our jaws and work on articulation and go through Shakespeare, and yet being able to be a part of that lineage, that heritage, that grand tradition of pretending to be someone else is just so important. It's just so important to empathy, I think. I'm gonna stop talking.
No, I agree. I did want to share that we got a chat from Hannah Gaffney. Hello, Hannah. Who says Jamison is an amazing teaching artist, compassionate and intelligent. So I wanted to share that.
Aww.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. I think we're gonna wrap up there. We got a few questions. Thank you so much. It is always such a pleasure to talk with you about art, about theater. It's always nice to be, as I was saying earlier, to be connecting with other people about theater right now, because it feels very distant.
Yeah, agreed.
So yeah, thanks for joining us, Jamison.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a little bit of business. Just a reminder to everyone that we have 2 more of these. So if you enjoyed chatting with Jamison, you're gonna love it even. No. So on June 23rd, we'll have Jarrell Henderson. Jarrell's a Chicago-based director, originally from Philly, who directed Untitled for Inishnuwa in 2019, which was a beautiful solo show that he directed, and I believe got a Barrymore nomination for. And then on June 30th, we'll have Mike Dees. Mike has worked with Inishnuwa as an actor for 14 years, and he was last seen on the stage for The Night Alive. So if you want to register, Jess is putting that information in the chat. It's a similar format. Those 2 will be hosted by artistic director Tom Ring. So don't forget to go to the chat, look for those links, look for those resources that we shared earlier, and have a great night. Jamison's logged off, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Claire. I love you. Bye.
Thanks.